Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, it's Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, yeah. Welcome to Writeopolis, featuring authors RJ Barker, Scott K. Andrews and Kid Power, and, often, a guest. Writeopolis is recorded live via Discord on alternating Sunday evenings, a conversational show with audience participation, bark on without the BS. Funded entirely through the generosity of our Patreon backers. Patreon.com/Writeopolis Podcast. Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, it's Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, yeah. So I think we are recording, although we didn't get the announcement that we were recording, so, you know. No. Oh, who the heck knows, really?
I can see the recording bot.
Yes, indeed. And I did get the...
Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
Luke. Oh,
now recording.
Hey, there we go.
Let's give Luke a roll. Let's make Luke Kit. Just in case that's stopping him talking. It shouldn't be anymore, though.
But Luke is there, but not... So Luke is in the voice chat, but... Oh, no, you're unmuted now. Luke, say something if you can hear us. If you can't hear us, also say something.
Yeah. If you can't hear us, it's really important you tell us.
Luke Arnold is typing. It's got me on push to talk only. Huh.
Wow. We've never come across that before.
That's new.
Yeah, that's entirely
new.
Yeah, let's make Luke a fancy guest as well. And
can we make him heroic proletariat? I think that's the obvious thing to do.
Yeah, but heroic proletariat don't get to speak.
Don't they?
No, of course
that's
we
weird.
have to keep the proletariat in their place.
Better?
Come on.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Hey, I am here. Lovely to be here.
It's lovely. We can do our intro now. Again.
Now we're recording and the guest is here. We can do it. Yes.
Yeah. Welcome to Writeopolis, where we pretend that we're going to talk about writing and then don't. With me, RJ Barker, or RJ Darker today. Scott K. Andrews and the lovely Kit Gonza. And our guest is the wonderful Luke Arnold, who's not only an author, but he's also an actor that you may have seen in a small program called Black Sails, and is disgustingly handsome. So really, we just want to tell him how much we hate him, and then we're going to kick him out. So.
Well, I'm glad there is no video feed here, because I think when we booked this in, I didn't realize that it would be Easter long weekend, that my housemates were going to host an all-day jam session the day before, and that my friend was also going to be relaunching having a big band night, or was our first big COVID jam last night. So, and then I also didn't realize that when they changed daylight savings a day ago, it would move this from being what I thought was going to be 6:30 to 5:30 in the morning. So,
oh my God.
If it makes you feel any better, I'm looking pretty haggard right now. But I'm ready to talk and not talk about writing.
I can't speak for anyone else. It makes me feel a lot better. Yes.
Yeah, But
thank you for sharing that.
The video you sent me makes a lot more sense now, because you said he sent me a small video of a man leaping around on a stage. And I was looking at it going, is that Luke?
Oh, yes. It wasn't. I almost sent you the big hairband before. That was a little bit of me preparing, going like, okay, like I'm here. I'm sober. I'm ready to I'm ready to talk. But I was just somewhat maybe trying to prepare you for the fact that I may have only had a couple of hours sleep before doing this. But I thought you'd appreciate the fact. I mean, I didn't want to rub it in your face as well. Being in Australia, we got where that actually being in a live music venue.
It's like actually being able to have fun. What's it like, Luke? Remind me, because it's been a while.
I mean, I don't want to rub it in, but it was pretty fun. It's the first time we've had a couple of gigs here, but they've all been like real restricted seating, everyone's spread out, and this was the first time it was like a bunch of people with beers in their hands yelling, and it was very nice. Yeah, so it's around the corner for all of us. Fingers crossed.
Did you touch another human being? I've heard they're soft. Was it nice?
I bumped into a few. It's weird to like bump shoulders with some random people again. It's a strange experience. But yeah, it's nice. It's nice.
And it's probably not that worrying in Australia, because in Australia you're kind of used to the fact that there's a good chance whatever you bump in might kill you, because it's just dangerous.
Definitely true. Yeah.
So more philosophical. Yeah.
Do you want to give us a quick, for the Writeopolis people who don't know, do you want to tell us a bit about your books and Fetch Phillips?
Sure. My series is the Fetch Phillips Archives that take place in a fantasy world where 6 years ago, before the story starts, the magic died. So they're kind of like noirish detective stories, kind of in the vein of those crime novels from like the 30s, 40s, 50s. But yeah, they follow Fetch Phillips, who thinks he's somewhat responsible for this apocalyptic event in this fantasy world where dragons fell out the sky, wizards can't do spells, elves started aging immediately. And he is, for his crimes, he's trying to just get by doing a little bit of good for people in Sunder City, this kind of urban environment in this fantasy world. And kind of early in the story, rumors start coming through that the magic could come back. And so the first two are out, The Last Smile in Sunder City and Dead Man in a Ditch. And I just turned in the first draft of the third one to orbit a few days ago.
Fiddles has just said, yes, finally somebody sticking it to the elves. I want to just dismiss a thought we all have as well, because when Orbit first signed Luke, I was with Jenny, because we have the same editor, Jenny, and she said, I've signed the guy that plays Ron John Silver in Black Sails, and then she immediately followed with don't look at me like that, I signed him because he's good, not because he's famous. and I was like, okay, Jenny, I believe you. And she sent me Luke's book, and it just had a note in it that just said, I told you so.
Nice.
And it's quite annoying that you can be multi-talented. It's quite vexing.
We're against that here at Writeopolis, okay? Because most of us are trying to be mediocre at one thing, and you're clearly brilliant at least two. So,
we've told other guests that please choose one and just stick to it.
Exactly. I still feel like an imposter with both, but thank you. That's good to hear. But Jenny did tell me explicitly. She was like, "I thought this was going to be shit." That it's nice to hear that. I think she thought, okay, actors thinks he can write. He's sending me something, but it's going to be some half-finished manuscript that he's hoping someone else can tidy up and do his work for him. So it was I liked that bit of honesty when she told me that she was like, oh no, I thought this was going to be terrible, and was pleasantly surprised.
And it is because you don't often get a voice that noir in fantasy, and that sort of noir voice is one of my big loves, which of course means I can be hypercritical about it, because I hold it close to my heart, that kind of fiction, and you have nailed it, which is really impressive. Just give up writing, Luke. Just go back.
Thank you. It's one of those things that I always loved, and it's done so often. But I think, and look, I love it when it's just. I don't mind the noir voice when it is a bit of wallpaper and a bit of style. I quite enjoy it, but I do think so often it does just become that. It's like a couple of well stretched similes and some some hard boiled guy with drinking and smoking too much. But I think often in the kind of versions that we see, it misses some of, I think, that kind of romance that really sucked me in, the sentimentality that is all kind of, that balances out the darkness and the hard-boiledness of the whole thing. And so I think that was always the goal with these, to not just take the style of it, but also find out what really is a noir voice here, and generally it means just making everyone's lives as miserable as possible.
Just Kit, people are saying they're having trouble hearing you. Just so you, I don't know if you can turn yourself up at all.
I'll see what I can do about that. Sorry about that, everybody.
That's okay. What we usually first go into, Luke, is we usually just have a bit of a chat about what we're actually working on at the moment. And you're saying you've just handed in the third Fetch Phillips book. Are you doing 3, or are you doing more of those? Or are you planning on doing something else? Or are you just going to take a break from writing and do acting for a bit? Because I presume acting has been largely on hold for COVID.
Yeah, I kind of prepared for this whole shutting down of the film and TV industry. I think it was a good thing that I definitely started doing this in the years before. But that again, because we're on an island, Australia's in a pretty good position, not particularly due to the great, our leaders being good or any smart decisions, just the fact we're tucked down at the bottom of the world. So a lot of productions are coming here at the moment. There are things shooting. So I've got some, bit of TV stuff coming up, but I'm really enjoying writing. So I turned in the third book. There will be more in this world. There'll be more Fetch Phillips stories. I am kind of the plan is to build to a point where we aren't always in Fetch's point of view and things start to open up. And a part of this goal of the third book is to start loosening things in that way. But the next thing I'm planning to write will not be a Fetch Phillips story. So I think it feels like a good time to write something else. I've got a bit of I've just started dancing around, the first chapter of what that's going to be, which is a bit more of a standalone sci-fi, very weird idea. Can we swear in this podcast? Where are we at?
Oh, God, yeah.
Fucking lootly.
Oh, yeah. So I won't give you the full pitch, but the working title is "Go Fuck Yourself." So that's so that's the next thing I'm working on at the moment.
That's already a novel for 2021, if ever I heard it. That's just perfect.
They're not going to put adverts for it on the tube, though.
Yeah.
That's what are you working on, Kit? Are you back to
Yeah, a few things. I had it. Yeah, I got that non-fiction commission that I finished. That came out, so that was part of. I can talk about it now. So that was part of Alistair Stewart's Full Lid newsletter, which is I think it's been nominated a couple of times now for Hugo's for non-fiction or fan work kind of. So he was doing an April Fool's edition, but but he wanted everyone to know it wasn't one of those where it's like it was going to be, he didn't want to set it up so like people thought any of it was real. So it was deliberately kind of, this is an April Fool's edition, but he commissioned a bunch of people, including me, and the brief was write a sequel that doesn't exist, write a review or a piece about a sequel that doesn't exist. So did you do RoboCop 2? I did not. You see, I should have done. I actually pitched a few things. The runner-up pitch was Freddy Krueger the musical, which I'm still kind of a little bit sad he didn't go for that because I thought that was great. But the one that he picked was a completely fictitious Ian Fleming James Bond novel called Midnight Sun, which I had actually. I pitched to a Canadian publisher a few years ago because Bond's out of copyright in Canada, and for various reasons it never happened. But the idea I've never been able to get rid of because I actually think it's a really good idea for a Bond novel. So I took the opportunity to pretend that Ian Fleming had written it and then wrote this whole thing, ripping it to pieces as being horrendously racist and misogynistic. So I got to have my cake and eat it. It was really good fun. And yeah, other than that, I'm back to I'm still really cranking as hard as I can to get the novel out to the editor, get that draft finished. It's very, very nearly there now.
Scott there in the background.
I'm still writing endless lines of dialogue for NPC characters in a game I'm not allowed to mention because I've signed an NDA. Thousands and thousands of lines of meaningful dialogue for German Second World War soldiers.
You're probably the one doing the most actual work out of all of them.
Sounds like I've got my day job as well, where I've just started managing COVID content for the National Health Service. So I've just grabbed the hottest potato in content design for the public sector at the moment, and it's burning my fingers like you wouldn't believe.
Yay!
Yeah.
Wow.
And I've put RJ Barker's actually in a box at the moment, having a bit of a rest. And I'm, as you'll notice, I'm RJ Dark tonight. I'm finishing off the third Mal and Jackie book, which is I'm contracted for 3. So and I can
Dude,
write
I'm
them really
halfway
quickly.
through the first one, and it is terrific.
You're enjoying it? It's silly.
I'm really, really loving it.
Yeah, they're like sweets. They're Have you read the Spencer books, Luke? Spencer for Hire?
No, I haven't. It's on my long list of things I've got to catch up on. Yeah.
I spent a year where I couldn't read, and I just found the Spencer books. And after the first one, where it's kind of finding its way in, and the second one, it realizes what it is. And there's like 40 of them, and that was all I read for an entire year when I was writing, because each Spencer book is exactly the same, and you know what you're getting. And I loved them. They're like sweets, and I wanted to do an English version of that, and that's what RJ Dark is doing. And I can talk about it a bit from. So that's what I've been doing, and I've missed the seaside so much that when I don't know, but you put in your pitch for 3 books of what you want to write. I completely ditched what I was meant to write for the third one. Just when I'm writing a book, I'm writing at the seaside. I want to be at the seaside.
Great, yeah. This is all still new for me. That whole, there was a bit of that nervousness when I just sent the third one of this in, and I didn't. So I first got I got the deal for the first 2, and then this third one was added on. And like the original idea with these was to maybe be a bit more of that, just like, oh, this could go on for a while. They're each standalone mysteries. And I think I think partly is you just feel like what people want, what feels right. And so it has started turning in. And maybe I think it was also the fact of being with Orbit, like from the first idea, like being with a kind of fantasy sci-fi publisher, that idea, like something like, oh no, this is a fantasy series, which I don't know. It's turned more into that thing, but I was nervous sending this third one in because things did change for me as well. I think from my initial pitch of what this third book, and not having, not having done this enough yet, there was that first nervousness. So I'm still waiting where they're like, this isn't what you told us you were going to do. And I get kicked out and in trouble, but we'll see what
they
happens.
actually don't care. They're just like, no, we got a book, brilliant. Yeah. Did you? Because when I wrote the first Assassin's book, and I wonder whether you have a similar experience, is I thought I'd written a crime novel that was set in a fantasy world. That was my thinking of the Assassin's book. That's what it was. It was a murder mystery set in a fantasy world. And I handed it into my agent, and he went, no, it's an epic fantasy novel. And I'm not really sure it is. And he went, an epic fantasy novel will sell. A crime novel set in a fantasy world will not sell. No one will buy it. So I was like, all right, it's an epic. Okay.
There was a bit of that idea that I think when I first started writing this, I was like, not because I think I'd had a number of maybe not great experiences with fantasy when I was a younger reader, where it opened the first page, it was a bunch of names and words I hadn't heard of before, and it really kind of turned me off. So I think I'd maybe for a while when I'd had this idea of this world was having that story in my head of like, oh, it's a fantasy book for people who don't really like fantasy, and you go like, and then you're suddenly like, but then hang on, who's going to buy it? Like, hang on, why would you write something for like people who don't want it? That doesn't make any sense. So I do think there was that. I clocked onto it a bit early when it was like, no, you're writing a fantasy, like write it for fantasy lovers, but you do your own take on it. So that did, yes, I think a similar thing where I had an idea of what it was going to be, and then realized that the people who are going to pick this up are going to want fantasy. So yeah, they're going to want a fantasy story. There are certain things. It's not that you have to give everyone what they expect, but you can also indulge and enjoy ticking some of those boxes going into that world more than just writing what I maybe thought I was doing at the beginning was just like a Raymond Chandler story that happens to have fantasy dressing, but focusing more on the crime.
So I'm curious about this. Sorry So I guess my question then is like, why fantasy? If you're telling me, I mean, from what I understand, what you're saying is like noir was very much your first love. That was your kind of way in. What was it about this idea that demanded that fantasy setting to bring it to life, do you think? Or was that not how it happened? Was it some other calculation that got you to fantasy? I'm just curious.
No, I think it was partly the freedom, I think, for me. That
right.
But actually, even as an actor, like I'm always much more drawn to things that have a bit of magical realism, the things that are a little step away where symbolically you can express things that if you just do it, when you're too close to reality, I things get a little bit more dangerous sometimes and also feel a little bit, I don't know. I don't think you have as much freedom to flex the kind of, symbolic, artistic elements of things. So I think for me, I knew at the heart of what this is about, like the things in me, the weird, dark little places in me I wanted to reveal and the things I wanted to explore. And there was something about putting it in this fantasy world that let me find the ends of that and go a bit bigger in what I wanted to explore. So I think that was it for me. And also, I get nervous about saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, and I think just a fantasy world where you go like, okay, I'm not actually going to be stepping on real people's toes too much or real people's histories. Also, let me just feel a little bit more free in that side of things.
There's a lot of freedom in it, fantasy world. Because I could have gone sort of either way. I wrote a science fiction book that didn't sell. And my agent at the time said, you should write something that uses your imagination because you've got it and you've got something in your imagination. And I think he had a point there. I think that I'd be quite frustrated if I was completely constrained by writing in our world.
It terrifies me a little bit. Like when I do it's I think, and I want to. That's out there, but I definitely, my anxieties about doing things incorrectly would have more chance of hindering my flow as a writer. I think if I was dealing with the real world instead of all my made up nonsense.
Made up nonsense is the best. We do a bit as well. Where we just babble on about what media we've been messing about with over the past 2 weeks. I'm going to go to Scott because he's skulking in the background.
I never.
So what have you are skulking. You snuck in here without us knowing and have just never left. So what have you been up to? Listening, reading, whatever.
I have been enjoying obscure old Sherlock Holmes DVDs.
You have, haven't you? Yeah.
I got the series from 1980 that was filmed in Poland, which is just terrible. But has some terrific guest stars in it. In the first episode, the guy who wrote Downton Abbey turns up as the killer. He has literally 2 lines of dialogue in the whole thing and just stands in the corner looking evil. So that was greatly enjoyable. And I've just started watching the most recent Russian Sherlock Holmes adaptation, 221B, which is a joy. It's really well produced, and the essential premise of it is that Watson does know someone called Sherlock Holmes. They do live together, but he embroiders reality enormously in his stories. And what we're seeing in the series is the reality of it, where Holmes is this scruffy little ADD autodidact, and they live in these awful rooms, and the police hate them. But there are elements in their real cases that he embroiders into the stories that we read in The Strand, and it's just brilliant. So that's what I've been enjoying.
You said the greatest thing to me. You said, I'm watching all these terrible Sherlock Holmes films that I've unearthed, but I'm drawing the line at the ones with Murdoch from the A-Team in.
No. Matt Frewer was not Murdoch from the A-Team. Matt Frewer was Max Headroom.
No.
Yeah. They did 4 Canadian TV movies of Sherlock Holmes with Matt Frewer. I swear to God, they are the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And I sat through Roger Moore in Sherlock Holmes in New York, so I know bad Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. All this time, I've been slagging off Murdoch from the A-Team because it's Matt Frewer.
No.
Well, if you're listening, Murdoch from the A-Team, I apologise.
Take it all back. You're wonderful. We're so sorry.
What about you, Luke? What have you been?
I the last few weeks, because it's been that like rush to be a good boy and meet the deadline and do the rewrites. I really went into that like, I don't know. I've just been in that days of just working on my own stuff. Except I am also, I forgot to say this in the things working on, I am writing a graphic novel at the moment. So I've been getting through the Walking Dead comic, which I hadn't read before. So that is the main thing I'm getting through at the moment, which is really brilliant. And what? Yeah, it's. I'm just like TV. Have not been watching much other than. Look, the only thing I think I've watched the last couple of weeks was this movie, a documentary called Hotel Coolgardie, which is one of the awful things I've ever watched. It follows two girls doing the kind of work visa in Australia where they, take a couple of English backpackers and go like, hey, you got to work at this Aussie pub in a little mining town, and you get a real glimpse into... Australian culture, masculinity, all kinds of stuff. It's a little too close to the bone, and it's the thing that's most in my head right now. It was a tough watch, a kind of amazing little fly on the wall documentary. So yeah, that's the most recent thing that I'm still getting over. I was watching that. It was worth a watch.
I've never been to Australia, and I met an Australian bloke who's backpacking over here, and I said, I'd quite like to go. And at the time, I must have been about 25. I was very goth with massive hair covered in makeup. And he just looked at me and went, don't. What do you mean? Have you ever been to Wakefield at chucking out time? That's quite a rough town around here at the time. And I said, yeah, anyway, well, Australia's a whole country based on that. He said, you will not survive one night. They will kill you.
I reckon there are spots where you'd be absolutely fine. And I do think it's weird that Australia does have this tension between being, quite progressive in some ways, but also then still a real overall quite a conservative country with a lot of issues it hasn't dealt with and things that it thinks it can get, some areas think it can get away with because we're so far away and the world's not looking at us. And I think Australia is, I think of Australia sometimes as, like in lots of families, there can be that cousin that's kind of like when they're a kid, they're everyone's favorite. And we're like, oh, we love you. When you grow up, you're going to be great. And then they kind of get into their mid-20s and they're still like living at their parents' place, smoking bongs. And everyone's like, oh, like you've got this potential, but you're really disappointing us. And I feel like that's kind of where Australia is, that it'd be lovely if we got our shit together and grew up, but we're still just sitting on the fact that like everyone kind of likes us, we're pretty fun, and yeah. So I love my country in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of frustrations. But you should definitely visit. It is.
I want to. My wife point blank refuses to go to Australia because the spiders will kill her, and that is. And there's no talking to that. It's not like so if I come, it'll just be me. I'll be coming on my own. I wear a lot.
It's the fact that there are funnel web spiders, right, that will drop down on you and kill you, and there are trapdoor spiders that will appear out of the ground and kill you. I'd constantly be looking up and down, up and down, up and down, and walking into things. I'd be terrified all the time.
Oh, Lucas, come on, we're just ganging up on him about his country. It's just been cruel. What have you been mediarising, Kitwood?
I've been doing tons of stuff. So the big Marvel Cinematic Universe rewatch with Kiddo has gotten to. We just finished Black Panther, which made me cry because I just love that film so much. We also took a break from that last night to watch Kong versus Godzilla.
Nice.
And that is a movie with two giant monsters beating the hell out of each other. Spoilers.
You said that like you actually expected me to cheer, and I'm wondering whether you know me at all. Okay.
No, I don't care. I'm cheering for both of us. It was glorious. It was, as I described on Twitter, without wanting to give anything away, it was a 3 high five movie for me and Kiddo. We had 3 spontaneous high fives during the course of the film, which is that's a pretty high count, man. That's pretty good going. So yeah, I've been doing that. We finally finished The Terror, which was great.
Oh God, that's so good. I just finished that this week as well. Wow.
That was. I'm going to be podcasting with a friend of mine, George Lee, about that because I just can't.
I walked away from that, as we know.
Yeah. For sound reasons, because it doesn't get any better from that point. I watched You Only Live Twice because I do a James Bond podcast, and we've got to You Only Live Twice, and that was awful. Horrendous, just horrifically racist movie, and just really and a movie specifically racist towards Asian people given recent events in America. It was just a bad time. Did not enjoy, would not recommend. And what else? Oh, and I'm reading I'm trying to read The Spy Who Loved Me, but it's probably the worst novel ever written in the English language. And I say that as a normally quite a big Ian Fleming fan, so I'm really struggling with that. I finished the Stephen
It's
Bond.
it's the only Bond I couldn't get through.
It's
Is
terrible.
that the one set in the hotel?
Yeah.
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 I have read that all the way through.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to finish it because I'm a masochist, but dear Lord, there we go. But the good bit of reading is Kiddo and I, after an extended break, are going back to bedtime reading for her is now the Sherlock Holmes short stories. We're onto his last bow. So we started his last bow last night, and that's been so far just glorious because I'd forgotten how well Doyle writes to be read out loud. It just, the language just rolls off the tongue. It's beautiful stuff. So, that's been my salve against the horrors of Ian Fleming clearly not having a clue about women and yet writing from the point of view of one. And it's just, anyway. So yeah, that's me.
I watched the end of The Unforgotten, which was just an astounding bit of television.
We saw that actually. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything about the end of it in case anyone's seen it, but it's just astounding. And then we've not had anything really to watch, and my other half's been going, find us something to watch, and I watched the entirety of Bosch by myself because she said she didn't want to watch it, and I said give it a go, and she started watching it and she really liked it. So I'm rewatching the entirety of Bosch, and it is just amazing. Second time round, you kind of notice narrative things and technical things as to how they're doing stuff, and when you watch actors and it's clear they really got on.
Yeah,
and it's just lovely. The two lead actors that play Bosch and his partner Jerry Edgar just clearly got on, and so much of it is just in the way they look at each other, and you know exactly what they're thinking, what their opinion is without any text, and it's just, you can just imagine being a writer for that must be joyous. And because of that, I've been on a proper reading drought, as I've said before. I went back to Michael Connelly's Bosch books and started reading them, and I think I've gone through 4 in the last week. They're just superb, really, really up my alley. So there's a bit of a Bosch theme to everything from me this week, because I've just been so I'd forgotten how Titus Welliver is just. Do you watch stuff as an actor, and do you find yourself unable to lose it? Because I find reading fantasy very hard now, because the bit of me that writes it is telling me what it would do with this book, and not in a critical way, and it just won't shut up, and I can't relax. And I wonder whether you have that problem with books and acting, watching TV, Luke.
I think definitely with film and TV, that is a problem. And also, like I only dabble a little bit in the, starting to do more screenwriting and directing and stuff. Like, it's good. The right things will immediately whisk me away, and can be somewhat aware of it. But you have those moments of like, oh, that was amazing. It does make it harder to watch things that maybe that aren't that good. Like, very quickly I get frustrated and go, I'm just trying to think. I'm doing that game where you just go like, what would I do differently? Why didn't they do that? That joke would have worked better if that was a wide shot, not a, there wasn't a cut there. So that definitely does happen. But the thing is, there's so much stuff these days, and there's so much stuff that I haven't seen, that I think it just makes me a bit more picky with what I watch. And I can still get whisked away in things, especially at the cinema. I think it's why still going to the movies is good, because I think once you sit in those seats and the lights go down and your phone is off, that definitely helps these days, when otherwise it's easier to grab your phone and things. And yeah, I guess with books, I think because I feel so new to being a writer, and there's so much I don't know, and especially as far as fantasy, that I think I am a bit aware when I'm reading, but I'm doing my best to just absorb as much as possible. And I guess maybe that critical eye's still there in a lot of ways, but that's a bit more exciting and new for me still. So I am trying to, read as much as possible, and I am still getting whisked away and enjoying finding all the parts of the sci-fi fantasy world that I didn't know about. I wasn't reading before I suddenly became a fantasy author. I was like, I guess I'd better read some more of the genre that I'm meant to be in.
Speaking of the watching things and thinking what you would have done differently and so on and so forth, I was wondering, are there any
are there any roles that you secretly covet? Are there any characters you desperately want to play, or any type of shows that you wish would come knocking on your door and throw a script at you?
It's so weird, and I've got to be really careful with this, that I got exactly the roles that I like dreamed of at high school. Like I said at high school that I was going to play Michael Hutchins in NXS. Well, that I want to. That was my answer always. Like, what's your dream role? I was like, Michael Hutchins from NXS. And then we did a miniseries in Australia, and I got to play him, and all the band were involved, and it was, and it worked, and people seemed to like it. And then also, like, pirates were also a big thing for me as a kid, and the first film I worked on, like behind the scenes, was the Peter Pan movie they shot here in Australia with Jason Isaacs, and
that's good.
And
flick.
so it's what was it was incredible to work on. But I mean, and I was just like, I was assistant to the swordmaster on there, so I was choreographing sword fights with the stunt department, and they had like the Matrix fly team and a guy from the, like, Brad Allen from the Jackie Chan stunt team, and like, you know, the stunt coordinator who'd done like Lethal Weapon and all these films. But it was like every department was like that. It was like the best people everywhere. And I think they made like a 3.5-hour epic with incredible stuff. And then in the editing room, they're like, oh, that's right, this is meant to be a kid's movie. And it got kind of cut down to something that works. But, you know, as always happens, everyone's amazing stuff got left on the cutting room floor. So it was incredible to work on, but mostly for things that didn't end up being part of the movie, which does
Release
happen
the Peter
often.
Pan Snyder cut.
Exactly.
There we go.
Yeah, the Hogan cut, the PJ Hogan cut. Yeah, and so, but there was something about that. Like, I got to walk onto the onto the Jolly Roger and be like, with this, like, and I was 18. I was still meant to be at high school, but I stopped going to work on this film. And got to go like, hey, we need a hole in the floor here, and we need a rubber version of this, and we want to bash someone into here. So can you pad it up? And yeah, this amazing art department going like, yep, sure, we'll do that. And then I was sitting there with the director on the day and making up, I end up choreographing a lot of the Lost Boy pirate stuff. It's still weird. I still keep thinking back to it going, were they like, was this a prank? Why was I like this high school kid getting to do all this? But but there was something about that too, that like being on that pirate ship and my kind of film and TV career starting there, that to then end up on something like Black Sails was like, yeah, this is what I wanted to do. Like, so this is a long way of going around to going, I don't know anymore. Like, I do love, my mind is always in kind of genre stuff. And I enjoy, the kitchen sink dramas and doing things, I feel like, in, film and TV, because you have an opportunity to do things that are bigger. There's so much scope, in the medium, that I am always more drawn to things where, that aren't just, I think relationship drama, is interesting, but, why not put it on a spaceship or a pirate ship if you can? Yeah.
And have explosions. Kit,
exactly.
Before we forget, are there Patreon questions?
I'm so glad you said that, RJ, because I was about to butt in and interrupt you to say we have questions on Patreon. And we have to make sure they get asked, because these people have parted with their hard-earned money to ask Luke questions. So yeah,
because we are just filthy lucre.
We are, yeah, absolutely.
We're just using your name to earn literally singles of pounds.
It's literally called Cash for Questions. I'm not even making that up. That's what the tier is called. So yes, I would. Yeah, Luke, if you're okay, I'll just run through this. So Katie Bruce firstly asks, there was a point in book 2, no spoilers, that made me gasp out loud when I read it. You know what you did. Did you always plan for that to happen? Or was that just where the story led you?
Yeah, I think I'm guessing. I think I know the moment. No, it's interesting with this world. I think I know, and the overall arc. I know the things that I kind of put into play at the beginning that I know as this continues on, as we start to wrap things up, as things get bigger, that I can pull back. But really, I'm right as far as the plot of each book. It's mostly book by book. And the second one in particular, the first book was a short story that I played like an accordion until it became a novel. I didn't know it was going to be a novel at the beginning. And I think some of the scars of that are still there, which I also am kind of fond of in some ways. I like that, it kind of suits a little bit of where Fetch begins his whole journey. Where then the second one was the first time I've that was the first time writing a book that I knew was going to be a book.
Right.
And so even though I outline stuff, it's amazing when you have that moment, and I think this is the one that's being asked of here, when I think I had the realization too, when I'm like, oh no, I know what needs to happen. I know, and this is horrific. It feels horrific, but it has to happen. And so, yeah, I don't think that beat was ever in the outline. It just kind of happened when I realized that, some characters realize that there is some residual power in this world. And when they realize where you can get that, suddenly I realized I'd left this little, there is an element in this city where you're like, oh, if someone wants this power, I know where some is, and that's terrible. So it surprised me too. It was, I'm glad, that's nice. Gasping out loud is a good reaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always think there's a little thing in the back of every writer's head. It's just sat there, cross-legged, just rubbing its hands together, going, "Yes, but what is the worst thing that could happen?"
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but that's what we want to do, right? It's like that's the thing. When you realize that the worst thing could happen as a writer, then it must happen. You're like, okay, if
Once
this could happen,
it, you're stuck with it.
Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. When I realized it could happen, it's like, well, that's now the big turning point of the book. Here we go.
I seem to remember, I want to credit it to King. I'm not sure if it is or not, but I think it was King who said the thing about readers is that they'll accept. He said that you cannot have fortunate coincidence happen, even though it happens in real life all the time. No reader will ever wear it in a novel. You can't get away with it. But unfortunate coincidences, pile them on, baby.
How many Patreon questions do we have?
We have another 3.
All right, I better let you get on then.
So Kelly Marie says, hello from Liverpool. Absolutely love Fetch and the universe you've created. Can't wait to read more. Now that you've conquered the fantasy noir world, do you ever have plans? You've kind of already answered this earlier, but do you have plans to try your hand at different genres and bring into life new characters in your future works? I think the answer is yes, isn't it? Yeah.
I said that before. So working on a kind of a more a kind of a relationship-based story in a kind of near-future sci-fi is the next thing. But it is tempting, because I finished it. I've got lots of ideas for what to do with this world. Would love to do more, but I think it's going to be really nice to step away and kind of daunting as well to try and write something else at this stage.
And how much of that is? I mean, sorry, this wasn't part of the question, but it just occurs to me. So, how much of that is a desire for you to keep stretching yourself as a writer? Is that a part of what's motivating you there? I feel like you really want to just try and cut your teeth in a few different areas. Is that what's driving?
It's a little bit of fear. I think it's partly that that I want to try some other stuff, and I think also there's still this thing where it's like I am an actor who wrote a book and then an actor who's now written a couple of books in this world, that it does feel like a good thing to go to, both in my own head and for other people to think of me, when I've got a couple of different things out there. I think that helps, legitimize me maybe a bit more. I think even in my own head. But then also, I think it's just where my mind is. I think this next idea is the thing that was really, even in the writing of this last Fetch book, starting to keep me up at night and get me excited. So it's also just that this is the thing that wants to be written at the moment. So it feels like a good time to pivot.
Okay. Thank you for that. So the next question is from someone called Long Daria Vampy Silver, although it's signed Daria. And hi, Luke. First of all, how are you? And happy Easter from Daria. Yes, I'm everywhere. So I assume this is someone who maybe spoke to another Q&As. However, I hope you're okay despite all this mess, COVID and so forth. My question is born from my experience as a writer. When I'm inside the story that I'm writing, sometimes I'm involved with strong emotions and I start to cry. My question is simple. Does it also happen to you to become involved enough in your story that it upsets you, or in some ways you feel overwhelmed by your feelings?
Yeah, definitely. I think with all of the Fetch books, I've definitely shed tears in the writing and the rewriting. Which, and it's always a weird thing because you're like, it's funny when that happens. Because what's the saying? No tears for the author, no tears for the reader, or or something like that. That they are very emotive. For a fantasy noir story with a guy, kicking around town looking for vampires and things. There is a lot of my kind of emotion and into this. There is a real kind of, bleeding feeling into. Yeah, that's a long way of saying, like, yes, I cry writing all these all the time. I'm never sure if that means that everyone else will get that same amount of emotion. But yeah, it's always pretty emotional.
I mean, I can't tell you what a relief it was for me as a writer when I first heard another writer say something like that, because I'd experienced it a couple of times. I experienced it in my first novel. One of the novellas as well that I wrote, The Finite, was really, I mean, I had to dig deep, and it hurt to write, it just did, because of the subject matter. But it was a real, because it's such a solitary business, I didn't realize that was a normal reaction. And I did think that there was kind of like, what's wrong with you, man? You made this stuff up. What are you getting upset about? Like you knew what was going to happen. You wrote it. You made it happen. Why you? So it was a great relief to me to talk to other writers and be like, no, it's really upsetting sometimes. That's part of the gig. Okay, good.
I think you're just both weak.
RJ Dark, ladies and gentlemen. RJ Dark. No sympathy. Yeah. No sympathy. Okay. So I do have one more question from Patreon. This is from Farah, and Farah says, "Hello, Luke, and a happy Easter from Malaysia. Here's my big question for you."
I think Farah's in the room as well. Hello.
Oh, fantastic. Hello, Farah. So here's my big question for you. What's the greatest lesson that you have learned during your writing process with the Sunder City novels, especially from the characters? What have they taught you? That's a great question.
Oh. It's... Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like if I say exactly what they've taught, I think they're still teaching me stuff. I think when I write, I'm bad at going like I don't write going like, hey, here's a lesson, and I'm going to write a story that delivers this lesson at the end, and so the readers can learn something from me. I go in with questions and go in with the things that I'm wrestling with and kind of put my characters through it and hope that those questions are interesting to readers and that, that we're kind of all going toward the readers and the characters are all on this journey together, working through things that I think are in all our heads. And, one of the big questions of these series is like, it's a lot of what is it to live a good life? How do you do good in a world that feels broken? And which really, I think having written two already and then going into the last year where the world feels like it's breaking and those questions like, what the hell do you do? I do think actually writing these books has probably changed my life a lot. It's probably one of the reasons that even before 2020 hit, I'd made some decisions to spend more time in Australia, to spend more time with I think through writing them was when I first realized that I'd been doing a lot of traveling and a lot of ideas about what things I wanted to do, who I wanted to be. And maybe I think these characters reminded me that it was probably a good time in my life to practice being a good son, brother, friend, and that those were things that would enrich me more than maybe being good at some other things, or going to a new country and meeting some more people there, and that it was something I maybe hadn't prioritized as much, and that if I did that, it would be good for me. And from that point, I'd be at a more grounded position to work out and be a better person. Out from there. Sorry, that was a bit of a rambly answer, but
no, that was great.
I've paraphrased it in the text because Farah's deaf. We were trying to work out some sort of bot that would do it. So if you can read what I put and just think that if that's okay, and if not, if you want to tell me what to write, I'll write a more.
No, that's great, and thank you. Yeah. That's a great summary. Thank you, RJ.
Brilliant.
And thanks, Farah.
Yeah. She's very pleased with the end. And we might have some bad news for you, Luke, for something you said earlier, because every writer that we've spoken to so far has found that, and I wonder if this is the same for you, the more they write, the harder it gets. and the less you feel like you know, the more you do it, you're like, oh, no, I don't know what I'm doing now. It just gets worse. It's awful.
Yeah, no, this third book really, this was tough. Because I think, once again, first one, I didn't know I was writing a book, so it's all fun. You're like, here's a story, and then suddenly it's like, oh, we're going to put it out. And it's like, oh, but it all happened before it was real. And then I wrote all the second book I kind of wrote before the first one even came out. So it was still in that beautiful little bubble where it's just like, oh, this is fun. And, and it was kind of exciting because but there hadn't been much response yet. It was all this. And so the third book was the first time I'd written knowing people would like having already had response and reviews, knowing it was going out into this world and feeling it more. And it was tough. Like I so thought I'm really disciplined, I'm really good at getting up every day and hit my word count. And I don't know if I write well, but I know that I do it. And that's what I'm going to lean on and, all that kind of stuff. And then something like third book is like, mate, what a joke. You don't know what you're doing. You're terrified. And, I did eventually find the flow, but it really took a long time to get back to writing the way I thought that I wrote before I actually started doing it as a job.
So what was that? What do you think caused that? Was it about pressure to complete the trilogy? Was it about external expectations and worrying about being able to pay them off? Or was it something to do with the story itself, the narrative itself that was challenging you?
A little bit of both. There is something in the, without saying too much yet.
Sure, yeah, I don't want
there
to
are elements. But there are elements to it that I realized I think it was both together. There were things about it that were going to be challenging already, but the fact I had a real awareness of an audience, I'd heard the voices of people reading it, that I did when I was writing the first ones. It was such a it wasn't real. These people that might read my book one day, are so out there in the ether that they weren't haunting me maybe the way that when I sat down to write this time. It's like, oh no, they're real people. They're looking at the chat here now. They're there. They're human beings who will read it. They're actually there. They'll read it. They'll respond. If it sucks, you can hear about it. And I think it was, that first little jarring thing where I'm like, here we go. I met, that's not something I expected after, I guess writing, especially the first one, just kind of on a whim and as a bit of fun. And, I gave it to some people, they liked it. I read some more. And, and then also, I think that is that thing too, that I had an idea of what this book was going to be. And then, a bit of what you were saying, that where you've got to do the worst thing. You've got to lean into that. That certain things started to evolve here. I'm going this is becoming something else that I didn't, that felt like a bit more of a challenge, just some issues and, a kind of another prominent female character that, as you start writing into going I didn't set out to write this woman, but she's really coming in with some, a lot of personality and a story of her own that, just that pressure to honor the characters, I guess, knowing that there are people waiting who will read this and making sure that I serve them.
Did you lean on Jenny at all when you were going? Because she's really good. If you just ever going, really
Jenny is the best.
Well, I think I still am in that. I haven't yet. I mean, I've only just because I just turned in the first draft, so she'll read it now. So I think in the rewrites, I'll definitely be, making full use of Jenny. I haven't yet. Yeah. So no, she's read it now, and I'm excited and terrified to hear her response. But I'll definitely be relying a lot on her in the rewrites from this time.
I think part of the reason that I'm as RJ Dark quite going off and writing crime books that have no expectations tied to them is because to a degree going and doing the next RJ book is terrifying now because I've had I've had 3 books that were received.
I was just going to say, you've done well.
Yeah,
The curse of having a hit.
Yeah. And I am not a stressy person. I don't think about that. Once I'm writing, I've stopped thinking. I'm just writing. But it is this kind of little barrier to stopping you starting, because you think, what if I'm rubbish now? What if I'm rubbish now? And it's just there in the back of your head. And then once you start, you realize, actually, I'm not. This is what I do. It's a weird. I was talking to somebody about this fun that I used to play in bands, and I never picked up my bass guitar and had it feel anything a bit weird in my hands. But when I sit at a keyboard and start to type, it just feels like the thing I should be doing. And if I can find that moment where I've just forgotten about anything that is the thing I should be doing, I'm off then.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I sang in bands, but it was the same. I always felt, for me, when I had a successful performance in the band as a singer, it was an act of mass hypnosis. It wasn't anything to do with my ability. It was just, we somehow, between myself and the audience, we convinced each other we'd had a fun time, and so we did. And that's great. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is definitely a magic to that, and there was a magic to it, and I'm incredibly grateful for the time I spent. But yeah, it is different. It is different. Yeah. I think you're right. I think for me, because the storytelling just goes, it is what I've always done. It's always been a part of who I am. So yeah.
We're studiously ignoring the chat custard.
They're trying to pick a fight with RJ.
Yeah. It's vile stuff. But I think we should get to Luke's texts, because he may not know about this thing that you invented, Kit.
Stop telling everybody I invented this. I'm so sorry, Luke. He does this. It's not.
Kit invented this idea that everyone has their text that are kind of the things that they discovered at the right time, and they are in everything they do. Like Kit's Stephen King, mine is Watership Down. I don't think we've asked Scott. Scott?
Oh gosh, probably Terrence Dick's Doctor Who books.
Yeah, we'll interrogate you more about that at the next Writeopolis, because that's the Scott K. Andrews edition. So we're wondering what yours are, Luke. We do films as well, films and books.
Okay. Well, I think I reckon for me it's like A.A. Milne's When We Were Very Young and Now We Are Six.
Ooh.
There's something in those. Like one of the first things I remember my mum reading, and there's something about the nonsense of them, and I think the rhythm of them, of those little kids' stories and the alliteration and the assonance. There's something in that I think got into me very young. That the musicality of them are there. I think in it that laid the foundations for me. As the very beginning, it's something when I go back and read some of those poems, those little rhymes, it does. It feels like this is where it started. This is when I went like, oh, I like words, and I like the idea of when, that whether it's Alexander Beetle or whatever, where it's like this silly thing, but it has a feeling that isn't what it's explicitly about, but it's all in there, So I think that's probably it for me, book-wise.
Yeah, that's good, because you're very subtly saying, Kit, that he likes poetry. I'm sorry to upset you.
I've got nothing against poetry.
Kit hates poetry.
I'm so sorry, Luke. He does this. I can't do anything about it. It's just got to go with it, I'm afraid.
And are there later things, or is that kind of that?
Yeah. No, I think from there, and then I do think, as makes sense, the Raymond Chandler stories. Right. I remember, because my dad loved them, and I remember one of the first times he would have recorded the Maltese Falcon off TV, on the VHS, and the next day he's like, oh, I've recorded this movie that's good, you should watch it during the day, and watching that with him and so that was which Dashiell Hammett, but then The Big Sleep, I really went like, oh, I like this, and then read the book of The Big Sleep. So obviously that's had an influence on the fetch stories. And that was still, I felt like that was my first, both with reading kind of adult novels, but also for cinema, that, getting into watching Bogey and Bacall and understanding, like, enjoying films rather than just, Jim Carrey movies or whatever I was otherwise watching at that time. And so, yeah, I feel like that was still relatively early on, and I did, was borrowing stuff from that quite consciously when I would, you got to write a short story for school. That noirish, Bogarty character came out very early in whatever I was doing there. And then I probably feel like video games probably had a big influence, but I can't think. I feel like that's actually where I digested a lot of fantasy, like where I got a lot of fantasy from. Would actually be playing Final Fantasy and some of those RPGs more than reading fantasy early on.
I'm going to say that because I think that video games are a large part of why fantasy is not seen as the thing you get beaten up for being a weird kid for. Because they've kind of moved it into this acceptable arena where everyone's played Skyrim. So if you read Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, people are like, oh, yeah, I get that, understand it.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're probably right that at a certain point, everyone, they're playing Madden and Mortal Kombat, but they're also, running off with a team of fantasy characters and using swords and magic, and somehow you're right. It probably brought it into the mainstream a bit. Yeah. And I do think I went back and played, like when I played the Final Fantasy VII remake last year, I did also realize, like it made it aware for me of like, oh, I think I did kind of steal a bunch of stuff from this in the Sunder City. It'd been so many years, but you went back and like, oh yeah, I just like, there's some real JRPG, but specifically Final Fantasy VII stuff in my world building of, of the Sunder City Fetch Phillips world that I subconsciously just nicked. Yeah.
Look, the good news with Final Fantasy VII is there's like 700 hours of it. So whatever you nick, it's like a drop in the ocean. It doesn't matter. Like, there's such a cornucopia of stuff you can. I mean, as long as you've not got chocobos running about, I reckon you're probably all right. And even then, you can probably get away with it. I mean, it's
very quick question, Luke. Dinosaurs.
Oh, God.
The people at Writeopolis want me to ask.
Okay.
Which is the better dinosaur? You must choose from these two. Is it Tyrannosaurus Rex or the Triceratops? You'll be judged on your answer. So he's
I'm going to say Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Oh.
In your face, RJ, in your face, with your poetry nonsense. It's the correct answer, Luke. Obviously correct answer. You come back any time, Luke.
Oh,
you have a call like speaker after. I can get RJ.
Kicked him from the server now.
We need like roars for the right answers and things, I think. Yeah.
But no one knows what a Triceratops roar sounds like.
Well, exactly. They're not even raw. That's how rubbish they are.
But they've actually synthesized the T-Rex roar, haven't they? And they found out it goes kind of like that. They worked it out.
All lies and propaganda.
Yeah,
they sound like the thing out of Jurassic Park. They are terrifying and they are awesome.
Yeah,
are you going to correct about dinosaurs?
Are you going to start talking about big Triceratops again, Kit? Because if you go off on that.
Well, actually, did they? Because is the whole thing right? Like, did they have feathers? We've established that, right? They're all big birds.
Yeah.
The Triceratops would look pretty cool. I'd done the T-Rex in my head and thought what that would look like with feathers, like we'd seen the pictures. I hadn't thought the Triceratops yet, but I'll.
You're not allowed to change your
hell of a fan. I'm not going to change it.
I'm not allowed to.
I'm not changing. I'm just thinking about how great that fan could, around its head could look with the feathers on there. But no, it's still a T-Rex.
Well, he was starting to win me on changing. No. Well, I'll do the last sort of official Writeopolis thing, and then we'll just freestyle. Or if Luke wants to go back to bed,
for goodness sake, you poor lad.
Because he's been up all night. We ask for tunes from the Writeopolis playlist, and to give because we're kind of springing it on you. It can be anything you want. We'll do ours first. Kit is constantly surprised by the fact that we do this.
We're doing this again? Oh,
we always do it, Kit. Every week.
Well,
Even though it's not weekly, it's fun. Should we go to Scott first?
Let's go to Scott first.
Let's go to Scott
Okay. Because this has come up on my Spotify playlist like 4 times in the last week and I've been singing along to it in the car, I make no apologies in my love for Billy Joel. So I'm going with Scenes from an Italian Restaurant.
Billy Joel. Oh, you know when there's some stuff you just think, what if I forget to put that?
What if you accidentally on purpose forget to add that to the playlist?
And Kit, remember the rules, no Bruce Springsteen or
Black Crows. I've been banned from Bruce Springsteen and Black Crows.
Yeah.
Which is all I ever actually listen to. Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, so I'm going to go with the greatest band from Bradford to ever exist, whose name began with a T, which is obviously TerrorVision.
TerrorVision.
Yeah, and I'm going to pick a Stone Cold classic from their second album, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm going to pick a song called "Stop the Bus."
Okay,
and that will do me. You knew them. I know you knew them. I knew that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that, but I knew that.
I did. And I'll tell you a story about them next time. It's not. I'm going to choose a song called "Can't Let Go," and the band is Caught a Ghost, and it is the theme tune to Bosch, because we've watched it so much.
Okay.
I just noticed how amazing the drumming was in it, and then I listened to the whole song, and it's a really good song. It's kind of jazz adjacent without becoming music that's just about how clever it is, and actually not fun to listen to. So going for
okay. So I get grief about poetry, but you're allowed to hate on jazz. That's right.
Yeah,
okay.
Of course, jazz is awful.
I see where we are now. I see.
Yeah. I understand jazz. I just don't agree with it. It's like prog rock. I understand it, but I don't.
I'm against it on principle.
Yeah. Just stop noodling about, showing me how clever you are, and play a tune. So, Luke, this is completely uncontentious. Just go with something you like. We won't judge you.
Okay. I can feel that there is.
RJ won't judge you at all.
It's actually worse. Having listened to it and the judgment going back and forth has made it more terrifying. But I'm just going to go with one that, is played recently. It popped up in the bar last night. Down in Mexico by the Coasters.
Oh, nice. I don't even know that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Solid choice.
Yeah, I don't have any story or anything to go with it. I was thinking doing something Tom Waitsy because it can't, or something that fits the fetch vibe. But I'm just going to go Down in Mexico by the Coast. It's a fun song.
I've never even heard of that band, so that will be an adventure for me to
I reckon you'll know it. I bet. Yeah, when you hear it, you go like, oh yeah, this. But yeah, there you go. Enjoy.
Cool.
Kit, I have to say, I'm glad you said the best band from Bradford that begins with a T, because if you just left it from Bradford and then gone with TerrorVision, I would have had to come in with some New Model Army love, and there would have been a bust-up.
I left it hanging for a reason and then clarified for also a very good reason. I knew what game I was playing there, Scott. Trust me.
I didn't listen to New Model Army for years and years and years because I was so shocked to get to his front tooth was missing and it freaked me out. And then years later I heard it again, and they are very, very good at New Model Army. So yeah, better than TerrorVision, sadly.
Luke, we have kept you past time, and I know if I were you, I would be so desperate to get back to bed at this point. Stop talking to the crazy limey. But I did want to pull out a question from Katie in the chat, because it is related to the book launch. So the question was, are any of the worldwide launch dates going to be rearranged? Do you know at this point? And is there any chance of visiting? Yeah, sorry to spring a business question on you right at the end, but it did come up.
I'm loving it. I'm having a great time chatting with you guys. I'm surprised how awake I'm feeling. I do have to say beforehand, I was a bit like, because it was the moment when I realized that the daylight savings, I thought it took an hour from me instead of gave one, was a bit daunting, but I've woken up, so I'm great. There is. At the moment, there is nothing planned. There's a whole in Australia at the moment. We can't even get on a plane unless you commit to the fact you're going to be gone for 3 months. Like, you can't duck out and come back. They're like, if you're going, like, well, you're going because you're moving away. And like, even going interstate in Australia is an issue right now. Suddenly things close. So I cannot wait to actually start traveling again and to, last year I was planning to be in the UK and in Italy and a bunch of places. No, nothing yet. I cannot wait to actually come around and get to meet people. Now my book's out in the world and, do some events and things like that. But at the moment, unfortunately, I'm stuck down under.
Do you think there's a chance that by September we might all be free? You might be able to come to Fantasy College, I believe, Birmingham, one of Britain's most beautiful cities.
Oh, I mean, I would love to. Anything's possible. I've had to completely relax into an existence this year of like, I don't know, like we'll see. Not get my hopes up for anything too much because everything's changing on a whim so often. Like, I guess it is. So yeah, that sounds great. If it's not this year, so that's going ahead this year, is it? And you've got that all lined up.
It's set up, and they're saying it's going ahead. I booked the hotel for it today, so
great. Okay,
so hopefully it will be lovely to see you in the flesh because I've spoken to you a few times.
Yeah, it would. I cannot wait till we actually get to hang out in person. This year would be lovely. I have a feeling, I guess actually it's still pretty early in the year. September could work, couldn't it? I don't know, but I think I'm not getting. I'm not getting too excited about anything at the moment because the moment I do, like everything seems to get cancelled and things happen. So I cannot wait till I can actually see people again outside. Like, I just spent a year in Australia for the first time. Like, I spent a whole year in this country. That hasn't happened since I left Australia for the first time. Like, it was very strange. So it is nice but strange that I'm actually not. Yeah, that I haven't been hopping on a plane every month like I have been for the last, 15 years or something.
That goes back to what you're saying about Australia, that you do seem very keen to get away.
There's a lot to love about this place, but it was also, it's nice to visit some other places too. But it has been, it's been nice being made to be home and explore Australia a bit more. I think it was a bit of a silver lining for me, I think, being made to spend a bit more time at home.
It's home is always home. And I'm always shocked by how big Australia is when you actually sort of see it in reference to our country, which is tiny.
Yes.
God, it's huge.
It is, and it is amazing, and it is so diverse. Like, the fact that we really do have, like, there's a lot of desert, and then like the western coast of Australia is incredible, and it took me a while to really explore that. And then, there's up by the Barrier Reef, and I still haven't been to Tasmania, which is a whole other kind of climate and environment and things. So there is lots of it. I've got to see some more of it too. But you should get over here. There's spiders around, but most of them don't kill you.
my favourite Australian animal is duck-billed platypus because it doesn't kill you; it just puts you through agony for 24 hours. It's the cruelest poison. It doesn't look like it's going to do that.
No, it doesn't.
Just a little secret bit of poison there, just to mix it up. Yeah, that would be a hell of a way to go. I don't know what platypus fatalities are like, but I think the numbers are pretty low.
It doesn't kill you. I was reading about it. I was reading an interview. He'd been in, I think, the Korean War, and he'd been shot 4 times. Gone in, got his friend out of the jungle, and carried his friend on his shoulders with these 4 bullet wounds in him. And he was saying that he'd been stung by a platypus, and he said, given the choice, I would go through the shootings again.
Wow.
And it's just a nerve poison that just causes agony, and then goes.
It goes away.
Yeah, it's not designed to kill. It's designed to make things stop.
It's designed to make you never try and go near a duck-billed platypus again. I mean,
I'm never going to watch Phineas and Ferb in the same way ever again.
But in evolutionary terms, that makes perfect sense. It's ideal, really.
You're never going to mess with it. And it's only the males have them. I think it's a fighting thing. It's a spur on their back feet.
I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know all this. So yeah, here we're just worried about like which, we're too busy memorizing which snakes will kill you, or how many hours you've got between getting bitten to when you die.
get the antivenom down
hadn't
you,
even
right,
got to
right.
the platypus. Yeah.
Is that part of your school curriculum? I love. Is it really? I just imagine
It's not quite, but it's just that common knowledge that you say, when you're having a beer at the barbecue, it's going, oh, yeah, redback spiders, you got 8 hours with that. You don't need to rush off. But a funnel web, you should probably get going, pretty quick. A red belly black snake, you're all right. But a brown snake, brown snakes, you're in trouble. But the others, you're all right. I heard a story recently. There was someone near where my parents live who I think one guy who was out there and got he had wellies on and got bitten by a snake, and so take him into hospital, get the antivenom. He's recovering, and then his dad was back at the farm, got bitten by the same snake because the fangs were still in the welly. So he went in and put the welly on, and then went. And next minute he's in there as well. It still had the venom on the fang. So yeah, you got to, even when they're not attached to a snake, the fangs can still get you out here.
Best avoided. Blimey.
because you've got the blue-ringed octopus as well, haven't you? Just tiny and cute and beautiful, and if you pick it up, you're dead, and that's it.
Yeah, no, that's right. That is, I haven't seen one of them anywhere, but yeah, the ocean's a whole other thing. Like on land, it's dangerous enough, and we got just incredible beaches, but I remember the first time, even like local beaches to swim at all the time, and you're like, oh, you feel pretty safe, and then I put a snorkel and goggles on, and you look underneath, and you go like, I never want to swim here again. It's just stingrays and all kinds of crazy stuff that you don't. Yeah, we got everything here, but it's fun.
See, on British beaches, we've got litter.
Some of that is scarier than the blue ring octopus, though.
It's
true, nasty tetanus on a British beach.
My dad once explained to me, he said, every time you go swimming in the sea, you're voluntarily entering the food chain. And since then, I've always been a bit too scared.
It's probably good for us. Good for our hubris to balance it out a bit sometimes. To be somewhere where we're like, oh yeah, we're not king shit here. There's
There's in Whitby, which I was just taken to now, it's the most terrifying. I think the whole of the boat ships is based on this one thing in the sea that terrifies me. There's like a really long pier, and it's in two bits. Between them, there is like a bowl of rock, it looks like, and there's just a big sign above it and says this pool is dangerous. And my granddad just used to walk me on the pier and say, if you go down there, you will die. And that's the entire sea to me. If I go in it, I'm going to die. And because of my granddad just was pushed into me, like, the sea wants to kill me. And that's I wrote an entire trilogy based on the sea does want to kill you.
Well, thanks to RJ's granddad, I guess.
Yeah, great.
Keep the nightmares coming.
Actually, I'm going to share this since we're talking about granddads. Luke, when I was a kid, my granddad and I, on the long Saturdays, we used to sit at home and we used to record radio plays on an old tape deck. And the characters that we would play were always from the books that he would read me. And so I still have tapes of 6-year-old me and my granddad doing our version of Treasure Island, with him as Long John Silver and me as Jim Hawkins. And they're some of my most treasured possessions. And you are so lucky that you got to play Long John Silver.
Yeah. That's beautiful. But no, it is crazy. Yeah, it was a ridiculous thing. I mean, I love being a part of that show. It's an amazing thing that happens when you get a bunch of people, pretty much you all take into a country that is far away, and you leave everything else behind, and you have thousands of people who are going to make the costume, like who are going to build you ships and make costumes, and like this idea that's in someone's head that's become this collective story you're telling together, that you just actually have the support of a network It's also like when we started, it's like no one was like watching the show. It just felt like we were making it for ourselves. It was like, yeah, the show's not a big breakout hit, but we want another season because this is fun. We're like, okay, so like the writers were just writing what they want. It's like, yeah, let's take them into a storm and let's hunt some sharks. And the network's like, sure, cool, we'll give you money for that. That sounds fun. We're like, okay. And as actors, make suggestions, go, I think this could happen. And we're like, you talk with the writers, and it was a very collaborative process with beautiful people where we had the amazing support to realize it. And so both, like, I love Treasure Island. I already loved it. And so being the part of that was exciting. But the way we got to do it, we still all kind of pinch ourselves and still feel really lucky that we got to be on a show that felt as special as that did. Yeah, but no. So that was just me agreeing with you. Yes, I was very lucky. I got to play with myself.
Did you ever have a moment? Were they full size the ship? Scale replicas?
So they were scale replicas that we would, never on the water, always in the back lot. And they went, you didn't get, most of them were a little cut down. They only went up to the second lot of sails, but we still had like 2 lots of sails in what would be 3. So we didn't have the 2 gallons at the top. But even though we're on a back lot, we had to decide what we were shooting based on the wind still, because, if you put the sails down on a day with the wind, like it would try and take off, and we'd, sail through a township in Cape Town. There was even, and because there was a half ship that was in the water tank as well. So it was even beginning of season 3, we did a boarding where, the grappling hooks go over and we pull them in. And while we were doing it, it was 2 ships coming together over water. And I think we were finished and we all just looked at each other. It was like, that felt real. It's like, yeah, it did. We'd like put the gangplanks over and like boarded one ship to the next. And even though, yes, we can see, the big buildings behind and, the water's only a couple of meters deep beneath us, there were real boys' own adventure moments where it was like, guys, this just feels like we're being pirates and we're being paid for it. And it's ridiculous.
It's fantastic.
I went down to, I can't remember the name of it, one of the British naval frigates that's still in dock. Not the Victory, because not as big as the Victory, just because I went to see it and stand on it and feel the books. And I was just looking around it, and you see the size of it, and you think about how far out these people went, and you just think, were they all insane?
Yeah.
Were they? Because it's so rickety and tiny. You don't really realize how small they are. I'm kind of
never. People ask me, like, oh, do you think you'd want to be a pirate? It's like, not on your life. Like those ships, for months out there with a bunch of smelly dudes in those like cramped quarters, like just a nightmare.
And then you realize the reason people did it, they joined the Navy, was it was a nightmare out there, but actually you got fed.
Yeah.
And it was better than being in the town. So you just think, God, life is actually hell. It's bad.
I guess you're right. Back then it wasn't going like, oh, it's not just bad on the ship, it's bad everywhere. So,
It's slightly worse on the ship.
Yeah.
No, history is the greatest horror show. There's no question about that in my mind.
Yeah.
That's a question you get as a writer. Oh, which of your books would you like to go back and live in? I'm just like, none of them.
Yeah, have you read my books?
I'd be dead in seconds. Are you mad?
I don't know. My first books were about people surviving a pandemic, so I kind of feel like I'm living it.
Oh no! What are you? Be careful what you write next.
It's all my fault. It's all coming true.
Yeah.
Alicia is mentioning premature books, which are just so close to my heart. And have you read those, Luke?
No.
Oh, they're the best sailing books.
Yeah, right. Which one did you say? Matthew and Briss?
The Aubrey Maturin books, which are written by Patrick Aubrey. Master and Commander, the film is.
Oh yes, sorry, I have. I read the first one. I did read that when we're doing season 1 of Black Sails. But yeah, you're right. It was that was some of the best education, to get a sense of what it was really like. They are incredible. So yeah, only the first one so far.
Every so often I get somebody come to me and say, "Oh, where can I learn about sailing?" And I just say, "Read those books," because you can't actually learn about sailing enough to sell it in a book, but that book, they will teach you enough. We should let you go. We've run on now for an hour and a half.
Oh, okay, yes, I will go. It's been so great chatting with you, and even at 5:30 to 7 in the morning on Easter Monday. But it's been a real joy. I really appreciate you asking me on this.
Hopefully we'll get you back at a more civil and do it again one day if you want.
Absolutely.
You're
Anytime.
Well, you know more about dinosaurs than RJ, so as far as I'm concerned, you can come back every fortnight. That's fine. Absolutely.
Yeah, Team T-Rex.
Exactly. Team T-Rex all the way. Absolutely.
Next time you come, make sure you bring some poetry to read, King.
All right.
I'll write a poem about T-Rexes next time I'm here.
Perfect.
Just to piss everyone off at once. Yeah.
It's pretty, just before we sign off, we should say next week, though it's not next week, is it, Kit?
No, it's in 2 weeks' time, as always.
2 weeks' time is probably a boring one because it's just us.
No, it's not going to be boring. It's going to be great. It's going to be a listener mailbag, and we're going to interrogate Scott K. Andrews, who as RJ said, is an interloper who snuck in and has been taking part now as a host for the last few weeks, but we haven't really had a chance to get to know him. So we're going to sit him down in a chair. We're going to shine a really bright light in his eyes, because that's what you do when you interrogate people. And we're going to find out who this Scott K. Andrews is and what he's doing here.
It's all about me.
Exactly.
We're going to put the fear of God into.
We absolutely are, or T-Rexes at the very least. So look out for that in 2 weeks' time.
A big round of applause for Luke, and thank you for coming.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Luke.
Really great.
Absolute pleasure to talk to you.
We'll see you all in a fortnight. It's been brilliant.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Writeopolis records alternating Sundays via Discord. To take part in future shows, visit patreon.com/Writeopolis podcast to find our server details. You can also support the show there in return for Discord perks and early access. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and spread the word. Thanks again. Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid it. Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, yeah.